Hello and welcome to the Outtakes, the official podcast of National Student Pride, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with some amazing queer people doing some incredible things within the community, both inside and out, to better the lives of queer people everywhere. Today I'm here with Adam Barks, the Associate Director of Education, Youth and Sport at Stonewall. So thank you, Adam, for joining us on the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Have you had a good day so far?
Yeah, really busy, talking to lots and lots of students, and yeah, been really good.
Have you come here before?
I haven't, it's my first time.
It's my first time as well.
Yeah, which sounds really bad, but I think we were here last year, so...
And also COVID, for a few years sort of.
Yeah, so we had some colleagues that came last year, and the glowing references of how amazing the day was from last year, I feel like every single person that has volunteered today and worked here today has also said the same. So really nice environment, lots of drag queens and drag kings walking around, which is always fabulous.
No, I love how you're going around like a careers fair, networking and learning how to update your CV, and then a few drag queens just waltz past. It's just fabulous. So you are here with Stonewall.
Yes.
So I think my main question is, how did you initially get involved with Stonewall?
So I joined Stonewall about half a year ago. So my background's actually in education. So I was a teacher in an inner city London school.
Okay.
Maths teacher, if it's any, yeah. So I was a maths teacher. Detention. I was a maths teacher for 5 years or so, and I did a lot of LGBTQ plus work with young people in that setting and across a number of different settings across London. And from there, I was like, I want to do more, and I want to get out, and I wanted to kind of do more around kind of policy work and recognise the need to do that. So the job came up, and it was like education youth, and I'm like a proper sporty spice. And I was like, oh my god, there's a sport, you can do this and sport at the same time. So yeah, it kind of was the perfect role for me, really, to get to kind of go engage with the Premier League and football and sports across the UK and actually globally as well, and then also get to work still with schools and young people across the UK, England, Wales and Scotland as well, which is cool.
Oh, that's amazing. You mentioned you initially started within sort of a school setting.
Mm-hmm.
Was it sort of a very open environment for you to do that, or was there pushback, was there hesitancy? What was that like initially?
I think in the UK we've now got legislation that means that teachers and academic staff need to do things for young people. So for example, in the LGBTQ plus curriculum, it should be threaded throughout all the different subjects. It shouldn't be a standalone one thing. But the issue is that the implementation of that isn't very consistent nationally. So if you go to school in one place versus if you go to school in a different place, you're going to get a very different kind of environment, but also curriculum. And I think what's really important is that we ensure that every young person gets to see themselves represented in their curriculum, and that they feel kind of safe, seen and heard in their school environment, so that there's a trusted adult. So we had some new kind of pieces of legislation that got put in literally a few months back in September. And part of that was that we now have a couple of lines in keeping children safe in education, which is this piece of, I won't bore you with the details, but a piece of legislation.
For me.
Do it. A piece of legislation that essentially is to safeguard and protect young people, right? So we know that there are LGBTQ plus young people in schools, colleges, universities, and in the school setting, what's really important is teachers and staff need to know how to protect young people. So the issue that we have is that a lot of LGBT young people don't feel like they've got a trusted adult, and that's kind of the language that the legislation uses. And because they don't have a trusted adult, what that means is that they will not say anything about kind of the homophobia, biphobia, transphobia that they're experiencing, and therefore have poorer mental health outcomes. So that was amazing that we've got that in. It means that schools and colleges and universities now need to kind of step up and do more and kind of create environments where they feel like they can talk to someone. What that looks like is obviously open-ended. How do we create inclusive environments? How does that look like in practice? I think a small thing, just like a rainbow pin on a staff member's lanyard, that seems so trivial and so kind of what does that even do? But actually that just creates this, it's the first step. There's obviously a lot more that we should be doing.
It's that little sort of twinkle that of queerness just in the school sort of culture that then has like a much wider impact on like the sort of environment that these children are in.
Exactly, and I think we've got to also remember that like 20 years ago, almost, well not quite to the day, but 20 years ago, we had a piece of legislation called Section 28, which is kind of where Stonewall started and how we started kind of lobbying and doing things in just the UK as an organisation. And that's 20 years since then. And in the current climate where we're at is that there is a danger that we could be going back to that place. So currently there are kind of petitions out to remove LGBT content from curriculums, and they're reaching hundreds of thousands of signatures. And everyone always likes to say in the community, like, oh, it's not gonna, like, we won't go back there, like, we've come 20 years, we're not gonna do that. But it can very much still happen. So it's really important that we're kind of lobbying and we're kind of having these conversations, but also so that we remember that, like, as beautiful as Pride is and as fun that it can be, that actually at its core we need to be talking about some real issues and how do we kind of platform that and really kind of fight against those things, because
how do we get organised as like a political body,
organising is so important. And I think for young people, university students, young people, like, it doesn't even need to be adults, right? It should be like teenagers should be reaching out to their MPs and talking about what they care about. We know from the most recent, like, I saw at Student Pride, it was really cool, like, along the staircase you've got the census data, right? Which is for the first time LGBTQ plus people are like getting counted as part of census data, which is incredible. And we get,
I think for a lot of people it seems very like almost just another tick in the box and very fast face value. Like there's not that deeper level there, but I think at its core it means that we are being seen and we are down in the history books.
Absolutely, we're being counted and we're being represented. And I think what's really interesting about that data is also looking at it from an age perspective and how it shows that we've come really far. Like, it's not that there's now more LGBTQ plus people in younger generations, it's that now that they feel more comfortable to express that and talk about that, and obviously being counted as those things. And there's still a lot of work to be done in kind of other generations, because there's still that kind of hangover of things like Section 28, like what they didn't get inclusive education, they didn't have things. I was just talking to one of my colleagues downstairs and we were saying, like, we didn't have that. I didn't have the opportunity to come to something like Student Pride. Like, as a queer LGBT person, I didn't get the opportunity, even at university, to go like, let me go be around LGBT people, let's celebrate, let's talk about these things. Like, it just wasn't something that I even had. So, like, if you think now to some of the younger generation, these amazing opportunities that they get, like this podcast, this storytelling, like, it's really important.
And I think what is so interesting for, not like an interesting observation maybe for people my age and my sort of peers, I'm not sure if you agree, is that we sort of grew up and developed in our almost formative years were sort of this middle point between the shadow of Section 28 and also this massive swing of like sort of pro-LGBTQ plus sort of representation and just sort of conversation and discourse around it. And that's why I think we are such a politicised generation overall. Like we've seen the pendulum swing, and I think we can feel it, the potential of it swinging back the wrong way.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Is like we should be celebrating the successes we've had as a community. We should be celebrating these like huge moments and like having these huge success moments that we should be screaming and shouting about, of course. But it's also remembering that things can still change quite quickly. And I think we've seen that in kind of America with things like the Don't Say Gay kind of bills that have been introduced. Like, things like that get introduced in places like America, and when we then start looking at the UK system, like, we could quite easily follow suit. And it's important that we don't kind of rest on the achievements that we've had and just take that for granted. So continuously pushing for further. So with like relationship and sex education guidance, like ensuring that yes, they should be talking about LGBTQ plus identities, but like, let's push it further. Like, it should be threaded throughout everything. Like, when we talk about Black History Month, we should be having like Black, queer, disabled representation as part of that. Like, it's not just like a one-time assembly or one-time thing at university.
Like a student group PowerPoint, let's just flick through like
tick box stuff, right? Like, it shouldn't be that. And I think some education sectors are really getting it right and are really doing great work. But then others are kind of probably a bit scared and worried. Like, we still have, like you were saying, with that kind of shadow of Section 28. I think what's really interesting is that there was some research brought out, or some kind of survey from the largest teachers union, recently, and you look at the percentage of staff that are not kind of comfortable with talking about their identity to students, but also their colleagues. Like, it's a huge number. I think it's way above 50%. So like, if staff don't feel comfortable, and that's including kind of university, this is specifically school and colleges, sorry, but like that also kind of then continues up into the university space as well, so professors and things like that. But if they don't feel comfortable talking about themselves or just bringing their true selves to their workplace, how can you expect young people to feel the same? Like, we can't.
And I think so often like people do like to create a bit of separation with their like professional life and like personal life. But I think with teachers as well, they are giving themselves so much to these kids. Like, they are around probably with them more than their parents, so that is going to have such a massive impact on them and their development. So it's about creating that culture for them to feel empowered to do that. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think what was really interesting about what you just said was like that idea of like the having this kind of firm boundary around like personal life and private life. I have this conversation quite often. I think it's really interesting that we go down the route of like thinking that the like private versus public, like, I lost my words now. It's really interesting because we assume that like it should be private. Like, as LGBTQ plus people, we're told
it's
that our
dirty secret.
It's a dirty secret, right? Or like it's taken as that, or like it's that kind of internalized thing from years of kind of having to experience kind of homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, whatever that may be. So that we're told that like I can be professional and just be queer, and that's also normal.
It's not,
and it's not,
to be queer is not anti-professional.
Exactly, and that's something that lots of LGBTQ plus people struggle with. It's like, how do I just be myself, and how can I bring my full self to work,
but be taken seriously?
Exactly. And we still know that people get discriminated against at school, university, college, workplaces. Like, that still happens in the UK and around the world. But it is important that we do that, and we are seen, if we're safe to do so, then absolutely we should be kind of raising it and talking about it, which is great. Why, like, at Student Pride today, seeing all these amazing employers that are kind of talking about kind of diversity and inclusion and wanting to be seen as diverse employers. And it's important that like all those types of organisations continuously push to do better, and kind of, it's really important that we have these spaces to kind of hold those conversations, which is great.
And you mentioned how like there's all these amazing like sort of corporate businesses now trying like making active policy change to create a better culture for queer people. And I know Stonewall has been a massive support system in helping achieve that. But is there sort of any other like sort of project Stonewall is working on right now that you'd like to sort of highlight? Is there like a little, have you got a little diamond project you're very proud of?
Diamond project.
Yeah.
So I
got a crown jewel.
So there's a few things that I think are really good to hear from like my team specifically. So we have a project called the Young Futures Project, which is all about getting young LGBTQ plus people, so from the age of 16 up to I think it's like 25, back into education, employment or training. So we brought out a piece of research, it's called the Shutout Report, that showed that LGBTQ plus people face more barriers from a mental health perspective, from kind of an empowerment perspective. They don't feel like they can be themselves, like we were just talking about. And it's essentially a digital platform, so anyone can go on the website. I'm like plugging it.
Do it.
Young Futures, it's called. So on Young Futures website, there's beautiful illustrations, like, and actually some of the illustrators that have worked on the project are actually here today at Student Pride, which is lovely to see. And they illustrate lots of people's journeys. There's kind of video content, there's employers talking about the work they do. So it's a great place just to go and engage and just to flick through. Like, there's no right way to use the platform. It's just a great place for you to click in, have a look around, there's support, there's signposting. Like, it's a great opportunity for young people to kind of go on and
it's almost like a digital sort of careers fair.
Exactly, with lots of different things in. And then the other project that I think is really great is we have got lots of sports programs. So we deliver lots to kind of Premier League academies, for example, and we go into kind of football academies and talk about inclusion work and why it's important. But the other big piece of work that we have done and we are doing kind of moving forward is working with university student groups. So for example, getting the student officers to get us to come in and to speak to, say, the rugby team, the hockey team, the softball team, whatever it may be, and do inclusion training to make sure that sport is inclusive on campuses, but also that any LGBTQ plus person can take part in sport and feel like they can do that. Because there's still a lot of work to be done there, especially at university campus level, for us to make sure that those clubs feel inclusive.
Yeah.
And I think when I was at university, I'm a sporty person, I enjoy sport. Did I engage as much in sport as I wanted to? Probably not. And that's anecdotally for me, but we know that that's a national picture, like for a lot of young people. So the more that we can get them engaged in sport, the better, because we know that it helps their mental health, and it also gives a sense of community, which for trans and non-binary people, for example, they need that the most, right? A sense of community and also better mental health. Like, what more could that community need? Like, it's the perfect thing. So it's why it's really important at university level we are having those conversations about inclusion and ensuring that those spaces are really kind of open and they can engage in it in a fun way as well and take part, right?
Fun. So you sort of mentioned that you were really sporty at university and stuff. Was it a case of you were sporty despite sort of the sort of culture around the sports, or was it something you just didn't experience, and that is sort of why that you sort of kept going with the sports? And
I think so. Like I did loads of different sports growing up, and then I settled on doing karate, and I did I travelled all over the place doing karate, which sounds like everyone always laughs about now. I don't know
chop
why.
the table in half.
But it
now, do it.
But everyone always finds it really funny. I don't know why. But it's something that I don't know. I found that it was a really inclusive space, and it kind of had that. Maybe it's because of the discipline element of it that kind of felt more inclusive, whilst you're also kicking each other in the head, right? But I don't know. I think there's still a lot of work to be done in certain sports. So if we look at kind of the homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia that we experience in the football stands, for example, it's great that we've got our Rainbow Laces campaign, which is Stonewall. Another plug, sorry. Rainbow Laces is our big kind of campaign. So we've been selling laces today as well. So that's 10 years old now, and every Premier League kind of club now has a Rainbow Laces game where they get the players to wear the armbands. So I don't know if you watch the Euros, but shout out to the Lionesses because they're amazing. And also great LGBTQ plus representation. But as part of that, they actually wore one of Stonewall's armbands in the Euros, and what a great platform to see incredible sports people that are thriving for the game, and look at how much that conversation's changed in this country. We're now seeing women's football platformed in a different level that we've ever seen before, and how important that is.
Thank you so much, Adam, for taking part in the podcast. It's been great having you on, and very informative, and just such a really insightful, amazing conversation. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.